Hey y'all, today we are talking about everyone's favorite monthly friend. So let's get into it. So, going back to the basics here, the menstrual cycle obviously is a part of our reproductive process and within our organs, and it starts during puberty, continues until menopause, and that is the cessation of menstruation. So the cycle is influenced by various hormonal changes, several phases, and each has its own effect on our energy levels, hunger, mood, mental health, emotional well-being. And in converse, how we nutrient advise ourselves, like how we nourish ourselves, also affects how our menstruation goes, how it happens, how it continues. Tracking your period can help you, take a little bit of weight off of your menstrual cycle because you can help log where your highest symptoms are, your mood changes, your flow patterns, and then you'll always have that expectation around like when is going to be my shittiest day or what is my best day out of this? So, of the phases in the menstrual cycle, the menstrual phase, obviously, is when the bleeding occurs. The follicular phase is when the egg develops, and then your luteal phase is when the uterus prepares for implementation, and then the egg is released. So, that's kind of the overall phasing. So if we're talking about day 1 through 5, this is when the shedding of the uterine lining happens, and our energy is typically lower then because we're losing the blood, right? So that encourages more fatigue. And that is also when we experience more hunger cravings. Our hormone levels, which typically is estrogen and proestrogen, are relatively low during this phase, and that is also what contributes to the mood changes, irritability, sadness. If you find that during these phases too, that you sleep harder, that typically happens as well because of the fatigue. So in day 6 to 14, following the menstruation, this is the follicular phase. So this is when the body prepares itself for a potential pregnancy. So energy levels then increase as the body recovers from the menstruation portion. Hunger and cravings start to go down and stabilize. Our estrogen levels start to rise, and that leads to more positive mood and more mental clarity. And then our sleep patterns are generally more unaffected. They're more quote unquote normal during this phase. And then finally, in day 14, that's your ovulation point. So this is typically the middle of the cycle around day 14, and that's when the egg is released from the ovary. Energy levels typically are at their peak at this time, and you also will increase appetite generally as well. Your hormone levels surge during ovulation, and that contributes to heightened emotion sensitivity and other feelings. And it all promotes your ovulation. It's a really crazy cycle. So, your luteal phase in 15 to 28, this is when the body prepares for pregnancy and that uterine lining thickens in case of being implanted, right? So, your energy levels kind of fluctuate during this point, and again, you feel more fatigue, hunger, cravings. So we tend to think um, more about our period as only days 1 through 5 when we're actually bleeding. But it's interesting because there's so many other touch points during the month where our emotions, mood, sleep, hormones are continually fluctuating. So take note of your luteal phase because especially pre days 1 through 5, like at the end of the luteal phase, that's when you start to feel more of like the PMS symptoms, if that makes sense. Lovely being a girl. So here's some common problems when it comes to the menstrual cycle. Obviously, irregular cycles. So that is when you kind of deviate from the typical 28-ish day cycle and have inconsistent timing, which could be like, I had one this month and then next month I didn't have one, and it's not related to being pregnant at all. So that's a common problem, but if it's very consistent, then that is something you definitely want to take note of. Cycles could be shorter or longer, and that can make it challenging to track then ovulation and plan for pregnancy. So, and the second portion refers to the absence of menstrual periods in an individual of reproduction age, um, which is a little bit different than what I talked about before because this is very consistent. So it could be like you never actually got your period ever, or where it stops after previously occurring. And this one has more external factors that contribute it than, genetics or things like that. So it's typically caused by like hormonal imbalances, and that could be because of nutrient density, like what you're eating or not eating, over exercising, high stress, PCOS, and PCOS tends to come from insulin resistance signs, so eating too much sugar and carbohydrates, and not enough protein. So keep it in mind, nutrition affects everything. It's really wild. Other things, menstrual cramps, and these can vary also during your lifetime as well. You can have them really hard when you're first starting periods, and they can also, come harder like when you're older. It's very interesting. Heavy menstrual bleeding. So this is very excessive, prolonged, and then excessively needing to, replace potentially bloating, tenderness at the breast and other areas, honestly, food cravings, fatigue, headaches, all of the lovely things of being a girl. So some tips for managing this: applying a heating pad or hot water bottle to the lower abdomen if you tend to experience heavy cramps. Deep breathing and yoga. Honestly, any movement, which I have down here as well, regular exercise, because it increases the blood flow, but it also releases endorphins and can improve those symptoms of pain and mood. A balanced diet, and trying to avoid caffeine, alcohol, salty foods over excessive amounts of sugar, and trying to manage overall emotional well-being. So whether that's, hanging out with friends and family or seeing a therapist, just keeping the love really high, right? So for menstrual hygiene, just always make sure that you're prepared for yourself and have what you need on hand, which also, again, sucks being a woman. And then when to seek medical advice. Oh my gosh. So just this is where it's important to really keep track of your symptoms and also the timing of your menstrual cycle, because if you find things excessively changing in a lot of different areas, it could be a good time to get it checked out and see if there is potentially something that could be rebalanced or helped out. But yeah, I think the cycle affects so many parts of our lives. And when we're going through a health journey, it's something that we maybe don't think of. We think of fitness and nutrition, but our cycle can throw us off track. It can, be helped a lot by fitness and by nutrition. And it's just like everything else, we really need to support it as much as possible. So if you want to support your hormones and your hormone functions, you can actually eat more of certain foods to support your hormones. So I encourage you to go into the client resources tab in the kettlebell tab and look at that PDF on hormone foods, because that can help you out in this area.